Now an English version of the tour we just did in German about the pharmaceutical department. I'm here again with my colleague.
Hi everyone, I'm Bridget.
We are going to talk about the history of the pharmaceutical industry, how it all started. It's a long story, thousands of years old. And we're going to do this in English so that also people who are not so familiar with the German language, which is kind of difficult, I was told, get a chance to enjoy the museum even when it's closed in this kind of troubled times.
It's kind of like a very exclusive sneak preview.
Very, very exclusive. It's a very special atmosphere, as you can imagine. And it's a privilege to be here without being disturbed by anyone. Normally there are hundreds of people in all the different departments, thousands doing an entire day. So it's a really special moment that we have right now.
By the way, we had a few comments on the last feeds where they talked about our situation here and how close we are together. So maybe we should just clarify that we're sort of keeping the recommended distance like everybody else right now in this situation. If you stretch out your hands, you can see we're not that close.
Very far away.
Of course, we didn't shake hands, we didn't touch each other, so we're within the normal rules and regulations that currently apply.
Exactly. Now, so with that said, let's start the tour. The history of medicine or of the pharmaceutical industry is a fascinating story. And it's a very difficult story because we are talking about one of the most complex things in the universe, the human body. I looked up on Google how many cells are in the human body, and the answer I got was 37.2 billion.
That's a lot.
Trillion, sorry, trillion, not billion.
That's beyond counting.
That's beyond counting. It's of course an average number. No one knows how many cells I have in my body. But the amazing thing is that we forget that when we wake up in the morning, you know, and maybe have a headache or don't want to go to work. All these problems, and we forget that we are participating in a wonder, you know, that is unfolding each moment of our lives. And we are all just cells that are talking to each other, interconnected. We start with one little cell that then, you know, multiplied and diversified throughout the, you know, the pregnancy, and then suddenly there's a human being. It's a really an incredible story, and therefore it doesn't come as a surprise that people used magic, magical thinking, wonders to explain the human body, because they didn't know. The things that really take place are invisible to the naked eye. You need a microscope that you need to invent. You know, this took thousands of years, and so we had this, no?
And we still are kind of blind if we don't have all the technology to help us.
We are completely oblivious to what is going on in this room. There are, of course, bacteria in this room. Not all bacteria are bad. Viruses and all sorts of nanoparticles that we can't see. But you know, normally our body is able to deal with this. But we are oblivious to this fact, and therefore it's a good reminder to look at these cells, because this is what we are.
This actually looks more like food to me. I can see like potatoes here and some sort of root beet thing here. And
it looks really weird. No, it's hard to believe that this is inside of our bodies. And we have the chance to light them up in different colors. Maybe I do this so you can guess, which is probably easy to recognize.
Blood cells, I would know.
These are those. And they bring the oxygen, you know, to our cells. Without that, we wouldn't be able to live more than probably 2 minutes. No? Then another little cell that is not very popular, but it's not very fair because we need it, and that is the fat cell. Where is the fat cell? Well, I have to look at it for myself again. Oh, it's here. Here you can see the fat cell.
It is big compared to the others. It is big,
and we do need it in times of trouble, because supermarkets are a rather recent invention, people forget. And 20,000 years ago, Bavarians that roamed the countryside, they sometimes didn't find food for several days. Yeah? So they walked through the world hungry, and then you need a lot of energy to keep you going. Therefore, it's very important.
So it's not really very fair if we are not very friendly with our own fat cells, and we really don't like them all that much.
We are not. We should be grateful to have them. The only problem is if we eat too much food, namely too much sugar, then we get a lot of them, and then we have a problem. You know, we might get diabetes and all these things. But in essence, fat is a very, very important substance. They're also not just sitting there in the body. They are communicating with other organs. They're communicating with the brain. No? So it's an incredible complex network trillions and trillions of cells that make life possible in the end. Something also kind of weird looking is this. It's the epithelium cell. I will just light it up because it looks beautiful. This monster is part of our lungs that is able to kind of push the saliva out of the lung, and this is inside the cell walls of the bronchites. Now, this is also.
So the important part is the little fluffy stuff.
Exactly, that is able to move the mucus outside of the lungs. And then something that we all need to understand what I'm doing right now. I needed to talk to you. These are neurons, and I think this is kind of obvious what this is. These are these elongated, strange things that are interconnected, creating our brain. One of those neural cells can have up to 10,000 connections with other cells. And then there's one, the axon, that kind of fires when there's enough signal coming from the other cells, and then it fires to other cells. And this kind of strange construction creates consciousness in our head. We don't really know what consciousness is, how it comes about. It's kind of obvious that it's produced by the brain,
yes.
But how this comes about, that on a Thursday afternoon, some atoms gather around and then suddenly they create consciousness. They become aware of themselves. That is one of the two big mysteries. I mean, the other mystery is, why is there anything at all? Why is there the universe? Why is there not a universe? No? These are questions that we probably will never be able to answer. But
you can't answer them. I was so hoping that you would.
Yeah, big surprise. I can't, and I don't know anyone who can. And also about consciousness, we might be able to create artificial consciousness, maybe, but whether we will be able to say this machine really is conscious right now, we probably will not be able to do so, no? But it might be happening in our lifetime, I don't know. Interesting times in general that we live. So this is a reminder that how weird this micro world is, and we can only see this because we have microscopes that can magnify it up to 1 million times. And behind me is this kind of strange bulb in white. Is
like a
blood
starship.
Is a cell,
shaped.
a human cell, a general human cell that we created to go inside to see the different elements. No, it's really nice to do, and let's try this out.
Let's go into a cell. Amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Big.
Yeah, it's not a spaceship, of course, and it's much, much bigger than a human
So there's a lot
cell.
going on inside cells,
Exactly.
I'm assuming.
There are hundreds of thousands of chemical reactions per second that take place, or even more. And we are completely unaware of this. A cell is normally in the order of micrometers. A micrometer is a millionth of a meter or thousands of a millimeter. So normally we cannot really see this. There are of course bigger ones and smaller ones, but this is the order of magnitude that we talk. Mm-hmm. And you might remember this from your biological school classes. Some elements we have reproduced, not all of this of course, but major parts like the mitochondria, that produce the energy. This is
By the way, just a quick reminder that you are watching this feed in 360. So you can wander around if you want to. You probably know how it's done. If you've got a set screen somewhere, you click with your mouse. If you've got an iPad or a mobile phone, you just wander around by moving along your own axis. So please use the opportunity, wander around if you like. This is the 360 feed.
Exactly. So these are our power plants, so to speak. They can multiply and they can produce the energy that we need to do the job. They have a double membrane. The outer membrane probably comes from the time when people think it was a bacterium that entered the cell and was enveloped by the outer membrane. Therefore, they have two. They also have their own DNA, which has nothing to do with the DNA inside the nucleus, which comes only from the mother.
But this is our power station.
This is our power station. There's even an interesting thing in Judaism. You're only considered a Jew when your mother is a Jew.
Yes.
And this kind of can be linked if you want. Of course, they were not aware of this, I assume, that the DNA is only passed from the mother and not from the father. No?
A bit of cultural information.
So this is kind of interesting. Then we have, of course, the nucleus that contains the strange molecule that we call
That's rather big
the
inside
DNA.
the cell, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not the smallest organelle in the cell, and it contains the DNA molecule. If you put this all together, it's about find in nature. If you filled up your bathtub, what is stored? It's basically the information. I just have to switch this off.
You can see we're live, even the phone rings.
Because you have the recipes to make proteins. That's what the function is, the production of proteins that are coded in what we call a gene. And everything is auto-regulated. So when the body needs a certain protein, the cell knows when to do this. It will unwrap the DNA, which is wrapped around in a complicated manner, unwrap it exactly at the right spot, read the information and copy it, which is called then the messenger RNA. It is sent out of these little holes, and then it will float through the liquid, it's called the cytosol, and then it will arrive at a huge organelle, it's called the ribosome.
So basically you're getting a recipe from the storage,
sent from the nucleus to
and
this,
it's sent somewhere else to do stuff with
and
it.
this has to synthesize the protein. So what are proteins made of? How does this work? Well, you might remember that there are about 20, not about exactly 20 amino acids in the body that are used to make proteins. There are much more in nature, hundreds of them, but the body has decided only to use 20. And now we have an information problem. How do you tell this machinery to take the right amino acid at the right time? And this is encoded, of course, in this messenger RNA. You see these different colored blocks. They correspond to the 4 letters of the genome. It's called the A, T, C, and G. They have complicated names, so we just use the letters. And this codes for the gene in what way? If you just used one of those letters, you would have 4 different colors. So you could theoretically code for 4 different amino acids that we have here, glutamine, serine, and so forth. They have strange names. But this is not enough because we have 20. If you decided to take another one here and have 4 different options here and 4 different options here, and you can combine them to give 16, which is short off. It's not enough. So nature had to take another one, in this case it's called a triplet, and then you have this 64 times, or 64 different options, which is much more than you need. But
so it's a bit like computer coding, where initially you just had the 0 and
it is exactly that.
And the 1, but that's not enough, so you can have 2 zeros and 0, 1 and 1 0.
It is more than 0, 1 because it's so to speak 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you make your combinations, but the principle is exactly the same. And there's also research going on of using the DNA to store information for future generations, because we all have the problem that we used to have, I don't know, a video cassette that no one can read anymore because the machines are gone, or the tape is gone, or you might not be able to use your old CD anymore, or the DVD. And so this kind of curse of technological progress that forces us to update to new technologies, this is kind of tedious, if you want to copy the entire internet to a new medium. And so the idea is find the ultimate storage system, and that could be the DNA, because
so it doesn't get much smaller than this.
No, this is it. I mean, you're storing on molecular. The one step lower would be just atoms. That would be even. But this is pretty impressive, and they have done this. They've coded the DNA with movies and music, and they can reproduce without any flaw in the system. So it works. DNA is relatively stable under the right conditions for thousands and thousands of years. So that might be a way of storing information and pass on information to future generations. So
what do you think, how long will it be before we can actually use this, before you and I will have
a DNA storage at home? I don't know. But not in too distant future, I guess. At least it's institutes, or that the state might decide to do this. I mean, until now, stone is the safest.
Of course.
You have stones that are, I don't know, 10,000 years old, and you still see some writing in there. But that's kind of heavy,
yes.
And given the production of information every day today, that's not realistic. So that would be a really cool thing to store information for the future. But back to the synthesization of proteins. So what happens? 3 of them go inside, and then the cell knows exactly which of the amino acids that are floating in the cytosol here they should take. And there's a little childish game you can play, and maybe you can do this.
I can put together acids?
Yeah, exactly. You can try to match the first 3 letters here with that, so you get a match.
A little distance.
At a distance, of course.
All right, so 3 of them, and I need to find the matching partners.
Exactly.
So we've got a little bump here, and then something like that. So that would be the first one here, glutamine?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, let's see if that works.
Good.
Yes. And the next one.
You move on.
The same bump, but the second code is a bit different, so I'm going to go with this one.
Yeah, exactly. Very good. I mean, it's not difficult, as you can see.
Is a double bump, and that will be maybe this here.
Yeah, exactly. And then it keeps doing its job, you know. This can take minutes. It's not super fast.
So what do we have?
And in the end, you have insulin, no, from island, because it's produced in the pancreas, and there are specific cells called the beta cells that produce this when you need it. Because what the ultimate function is to get the sugar out of the bloodstream into the cells. That's the function. Right?
Oh, I love the sugar.
We all do, but we have a problem that we eat too much. You know, when we grew up, you know, in 10,000 years ago, there was no sugar. There was maybe honey. No, that was something that was really sweet, but not easy to
tricky
find.
To get to because of the bees.
Of the bees. And then you had fruits, no, but not throughout the entire year. So sugar was a very rare resource, and our bodies are not made to deal with these enormous quantities of sugar, sometimes hidden. No, when you use ketchup, there's sugar in it. Bread.
So why is it so tasty?
I don't know, because of course it was the sign of the body. Hey, you found honey. Just eat as much as you can. You might know you don't know what's going to happen next week. Maybe you have to go through a week of fasting. So eat as much as you can. It's delicious, and therefore, you know, we are still having, you know, the same body, but the world has changed, and our bodies have not adapted. So we are running an old program. No, we would need a software update to say no. Sugar is okay, but not too much, you know. And that's the challenge for all of us, not to eat too much, to move enough, because most people sit in front of computer screens all day long. And that leads ultimately to diabetes, no? There are even people that are very young now that have diabetes, and in total the numbers, I'm not absolutely sure it's the right number. It's more than 400 million people worldwide. That's a substantial part of the population. And without insulin, they would ultimately die. No? And so you can't do how we did it in the past to animals. They used the pancreas of sheep or cows to extract it.
Which is a bit disgusting if you think about it.
It's a bit gruesome, yeah, but we do a lot of gruesome things as humans. So that kind of fitted, you know, how we did things, but nowadays you can't do this. So what they do, they create some kind of hybrid creature. So they take a bacterium, E. coli is normally the one, and then you shoot inside a string of DNA, it's called a plasmid, that contains exactly the gene to make insulin. So you have a human, you know, gene inside a bacterium, and then as we all use the same structure, the same software and hardware, it reads it and makes insulin inside the bacterium. And if you provide for the right conditions, so it's warm enough, there's sugar, and it feels, you know, okay, the bacterium, it starts to produce insulin in great quantities. This is how we deal with this.
So it's sort of outsourced production.
Yeah, it's a friend. You know, bacteria are really our friends in most cases. I want to mention, because we're standing here, one really cool tool. It's like the holy grail of genetics that was found in 2012 by two women, an American and a French woman. I'm really surprised they haven't received the Nobel Prize yet. They should, in my opinion, but maybe they will. And they found a pair of scissors that actually come from the immune defense system of the bacteria that they have in place when a virus, that we talk about later, attacks a bacterium. And the bacterium has maybe already encountered this. It can recognize it.
So it's a defense mechanism.
Okay. That was like the magical wand. And they couldn't believe how easy it was, how cheap. And shortly after they published it, the first papers came, within weeks. And it exploded. And now we have the power to really say, well, we take any organism in the world, because they all use the same thing, and we can fix it if there's a problem. Maybe there's a genetic disease, maybe this yellow should be a green one, and I can now fix it. No?
But how does this work? I mean, you would have to fix every broken section in
that's
every
of course a big
cell
problem.
there is?
If you have a fully developed organism, you would have to go inside every cell of the body. How do you do this? No? Well, the easiest would be, of course, taking an egg cell and a sperm, wait until they, you know, did their business, and then you look at that genome and then fix it there. And
just once.
Exactly. And when it then kind of doubles, you have it in every cell of your body. There is, though, another way of doing it. You can use viruses. To cure diseases.
Viruses right now, we have a very mixed feelings.
Exactly, but they are very often also our friends. And there have been diseases that have been cured with that already, you know. It's really amazing. And there was a woman in 2015, Jennifer Parrish, I think she's called, and she has taken 2 viruses that integrated certain genes in a lot of her body cells, and now she hopes to live longer. No? She took one that extends or repairs the telomeres at the end of the chromosome cells that have an enzyme, telomerase, that can actually repair this, so it doesn't shorten. And she had this integrated now in most of her body cells, so this will not happen to her.
So we will see if she lives to be 100 or 200
we see.
or
She's certainly not.
years old?
She's still going to live forever through this, intervention. But she also has another gene that makes the muscles grow, because at a certain age.
No more working out.
No, I don't know. She has muscles grown. I mean, I have seen a few documentaries about her, and it seems to be working. It was a risk. It could have gone wrong. Therefore, it's not allowed to do this. She did this, on her own terms in Latin America in the laboratory, and it would work fine for her. And she did this because she was convinced that it would work. Right. She's not a scientist, she's a businesswoman, but she's so confident that this is a way to treat people in the future.
All right, again, if you haven't heard me before, you are in 360 mode, so please take advantage of this feature. Wander around in space around us. You're gadget savvy, you know how to do this, so please enjoy.
Exactly. And now we are going to talk about things that might go wrong because of bad bacteria and bad viruses. So let's go here.
You lead the way. So Alex, where are we now?
We are now in front of a picture that showed the fate of many people before the invention of antibiotics. They had tuberculosis, and it was an incurable disease,
also affecting the lungs.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it can affect every part of the body. Basically, it's a very slowly grown bacterium that was found by Robert Koch. Maybe you've heard the Robert Koch Institute, and he actually found the bacterium that he called the tubercle, who was responsible for this terrible disease. He also found the cholera bacterium. It looks like a comma, So he's really a paramount figure in medicine, and he also thought that he had found a cure. He called this tuberculin, and he proposed this in 1890 as the cure for tuberculosis, but he did this in a presentation during a conference, and he didn't say he had found the cure. He just said that with animals he had positive results. It was very promising, but a lot of research still had to be done. That was picked up by the media, and everyone thought that's it, no? Because
so that would have been the best start for a startup.
Yeah, that would be like if tomorrow someone found I have the coronavirus, vaccination. I have found it, no? And so he kind of jumped on the bandwagon. He was under pressure. Everyone wanted him to have this, and so.
So did it work?
It didn't work.
That's bad.
Some people even said it made the tuberculosis worse taking it.
Okay.
So it was not the solution. The solution came only later on when Alexander Fleming, Scottish fellow, after summer vacation, found on a petri dish something white in the center, and around it no bacteria grew. And he looked at this. No, and he looked at it, and he had actually looked for something like this before, so he was kind of curious about this when he saw it. Someone else might have thrown this away, no?
Yeah.
And this is what we call, beautiful word, serendipity, in science, that the prepared mind, looks at something and said, that's the solution, right? And he was that person to see it, to recognize this.
So what exactly was he seeing?
He was seeing what we call penicillin. It's a mold that came probably 2 floors above through his window into his lab on this petri dish, and it
fate
grew.
Or accident? Or?
Yeah, it was just, accident, and he realized, there is a substance that's coming from this mold that kills bacteria. He tried to isolate this and produce it, but it's so minuscule, the quantity, that he couldn't do it. And then he let go. He didn't bother about this.
Okay.
But when it became clear that the Second World War was coming, then suddenly interest rose again in producing something that would save a lot of lives, because most soldiers in wars do not die through a fatal wound, like a bullet that kills them instantly, but it's the wound that gets gets infected, that kills most people and more. So that was very important, and they pulled this off.
Now you still have to tell the name of this magic substance that he discovered.
It's penicillin. That's the name of the stuff, and it was very difficult to make because you have to have huge factories, enormous installations to produce enough. It was so precious that they told the soldiers when they had received this that they used the urine to recycle the antibiotics because it's still in the urine of the soldiers. And it's
again not very tasty.
Very tasty, but
if it saves your life,
I think then you would do this, right?
Yes.
And a new era in medicine started because so many diseases were produced by bacteria that people thought that's it, no, that's the end of the game and we are done. But then something happened that no one had foreseen. Resistance developed because these bacteria, and you can see in this little movie how fast they sometimes can double. They also have little modification once they do this, little mistakes in the copying of the DNA, and that can ultimately lead to resistance. No? And we have created a situation now that's quite severe, that you can be in a German hospital and they come inside and say, I'm very sorry, we have nothing to cure you anymore, you're probably going to die. That's not a fun news to receive. I have received that myself in Munich during Christmas 3 years ago, where a friend had a very bad accident.
Okay.
And he didn't look, well. And then the doctor came inside and said, I have very bad news. What you have is resistant against anything in the world. I had to leave the room.
Really, really bad news.
But he survived it because it didn't enter his body, but it just showed me how close this has come. No, everyone can experience this.
Now, before you go any further, I would like to let you know something else. You see, I've got this little voice inside my head telling me if any of you comment while you're watching this feed. So if you want to, you can also ask questions to Alex, and the little voice inside my head will tell me what you want to know, and he'll try to answer it. So
exactly.
Please go ahead, use the comment section on your screen if you want to be in touch with Alex.
So that's a really critical situation in which we are right now, and there is hope at the end of the tunnel, because there's a virus, which is not very popular, the word at the moment, that might help us. They're called bacteriophages. Phages is a Greek word, means to eat. They eat bacteria, and they are very specific. If you take an antibiotic, it will basically kill all the bacteria in your intestine.
Which is not good.
Which is not good. I mean, people didn't think about this so much, but nowadays we know that the microbiome, that's what they call this, it's about 2.5 kilograms of that in your body, is really important for your health. The microbiome influences also your brain.
Yes.
They've done experiments which I found really extraordinary with 2 mice. Okay, one was very timid.
Okay.
The other was like a pirate, right? He was fearless.
Bold.
Then they exchanged their microbiome, and then suddenly they changed roles. The pirate became the timid mouse. The timid mouse became the adventurer.
So the gut is what made them timid?
Yeah, the gut influences the brain. So we are kind of remote controlled in some aspects by our microbiome. Now,
so you are what you eat is not
it's
so
not so stupid. And what you have, what kind of you are your bacteria in a way,
Right.
And so if you kill them all with antibiotics, then you might have trouble to establish that. And sometimes it's not possible even. You keep that situation. So it's not a really clever way of doing it, and there's a much more clever way. That's the bacteriophages, and we talk about that in a minute here.
And again, there's been a comment why we're so far apart from each other, and that is of course because during the current crisis we're also trying to apply all the rules that we have: no touching, keep your distance, wash your hands. So we're doing that as well, and that is why we're so far apart, not because we don't like each other.
We like each other, of course. So what is a virus? Okay, virus is something between death and life. It's not really alive because it doesn't have metabolism, no? It's not producing anything, it just sits there. It's a bunch of molecules put together in a very ingenious way. And it needs the magical host to actually copy itself. That's what it does. And there are astronomical numbers of viruses in the world. No one knows how many viruses there are, what types we have. It's very limited, the knowledge about this. And you can see one of those bacteriophages here. They look a bit like spaceships, so like creepy sci-fi creatures.
Yes, they're aliens on a planet.
On a cell or a bacterium here, in this case.
Yes.
And they inject, it's difficult to see, they inject something in it, and that's their DNA or RNA.
Okay.
And then they use sort of the framework of the bacterium to reproduce themselves, to make copies of them.
But not every virus is bad. Not every.
It's not. I mean, for instance, in this case, we can use them and say, well, if this specific bacteriophage kills, I don't know, let's say tuberculosis. Let's say take this case, then it would specifically kill only that and leave everything else fine. So you could drink, basically.
Yes.
And then after, I don't know, an hour or two, you're cured.
Now that would be sexy.
That is, I mean, it does work. It's not very popular in the West because antibiotics were such a success story that it seemed the easy solution. You drop a pill and then you're done after a few days, no? But the guy who discovered bacteriophages, Felix Derel, he went to Georgia, close to Russia. They helped finding an institute which is still there, and they have a huge research body about this. No? And they have treated patients for decades with this. And this is slowly kind of flooding into the West, the realization that this might be a real option. And there are many cases already that were untreatable, basically, with Western medicine. And then they took the step, they did this, and they kind of closed wounds or healed people. So that might be a hope for the future. In the first podcast, we got the question whether they can also develop a resistance.
Yes.
I think you can never exclude that. Yeah?
I have another question as well.
Oh.
And it's probably a bit on the side, but it said that they heard that viruses can also cause cancer, so they don't just, insert themselves into other...
They have definitely found viruses, if you have that will produce cancer in your body. So it's not only your friend, of course, no, but most viruses do not do us any harm at all, but some do, We also have, I haven't mentioned that inside the cell, we also have virus DNA in our bodies. About 8% is the number that I know that comes from viruses. So that means that
some evolved over.
So they got inside, they integrated their DNA into our genome, and it kind of worked for us. And so we kind of kept it, no?
So if I look at this kind of looks like what I've seen on TV last night.
Exactly. This looks a bit like the coronavirus, no? Corona, because it has this. These proteins coming out that looks like little crowns, or this entire thing looks like a crown.
So the ball with the
exactly,
extended stuff is basically its design.
And it's basically a virus made of proteins. We call this a capsid, no? In all sorts of shapes. And inside you have either RNA or DNA, that it injects into the body. And the way they found out that virus actually exists goes back to the late 19th century. Then when there was a disease with the tobacco plant, it's called, they found greenish spots on the leaves that they could not explain. And they thought, well, that's another bacteria-caused disease. And they tried to filter it and get the bacterium out, but what they found is that in a liquid that should be, I don't know, sterile, because they pressed the liquid through a filter with so small holes in the meshes that no bacterium they knew of could go through this. It was pretty sure that's not going to happen.
It should be without
they took the liquid, put it on healthy plants, and they got sick again. So there was something wrong with the theory, with the idea, how this is done. And so the next idea was maybe it's a molecule that does this.
Okay.
And or a poison, we would call this, no?
Yes.
If you want to give them poison.
Makes
so
sense.
Virus is poison. No, that's what it means.
That's what it means.
Yeah, what it comes from, right? But no one could see it because they were so small that no light microscope could visualize them. Today, we know viruses that are really, really, really big, and you can see them now with light microscopes, but only specific ones, no? But not a normal, virus of that type you cannot see. What you need is an electron microscope, where you use electrons instead of light to visualize things, and your magnification goes through the roof.
So we will probably even learn a lot more when we have microscopes that are even more detailed.
Yeah, I mean that's of course, if you can't see your enemy, what can you do? You can do nothing, right? But these electron microscopes, they go very close to atomic resolutions. I mean, still away from it, but you're getting close. So we're reaching the end of what we can find out about nature, because we are already at sort of at the molecular level. So this is where viruses come from. Out of these, or from these bacteriophages, we have about 10 to 31 of them in the world. That is a 1 with 31 zeros.
That's a lot more than you have cells in your body.
Yeah, way more. More stars in the universe. You know, it's a mind-boggling number, and it's only the bacteriophages.
Yes.
It's not all the viruses. No? So they're everywhere. Most of them do not do us harm. Now we have one that does some harm.
And some work for us.
But we will have to live with that, because there's always mutation. They develop, and then there will be a new superbug, a new supervirus. So what we experience right now will probably not the last of these events in the future. But they're getting better with developing vaccination. No?
So you think one day we can outsmart them and be very quick when they come up with a new plan?
Yeah, I mean, I would be surprised if in 100 years you cannot find a vaccination maybe in a day, no? And they probably wonder how long it took us to do this, no? I mean, vaccination comes from vaca, no? Which is the cow, okay? Oh. It's an interesting story. Edward Jenner was the first who actually did this. He observed that smallpox, terrible disease, could be cured if you took. It was mainly girls who worked on farms who milked the cows. Mm-hmm. And cows also have smallpox, but a mild version.
Okay.
Humans can get it, but it's not terrible.
Yeah.
And when they had them, they could never get smallpox, the real version, the human version.
So you get the cow version?
Exactly. And so,
then you're safe.
Yeah, you're safe. And so he took one, he infected a little boy with smallpox from cows. And then he actually experimented on that boy, something we would probably not do
very nice,
today. He infected him with the smallpox, and he didn't get sick. And so that was vaccination from vaca.
And that was also lucky.
That was very, very brave, no? I must say that he did this, something you wouldn't do, of course, today. And that is also the problem today. You can't just test it on humans because you might think that is a solution. And that, of course, prolongs the time until you have a vaccination. But maybe we have some human models in the future that are so good that you can test it on the model in the computer, and it says it's fine, it's okay.
Without little boys.
And then, and then we might have a vaccine within a day or a week or a month. I don't know. But I'm pretty confident that in the future this will speed up. No? But we will always have to live with this.
But it would be so nice, then we don't have to stay home for weeks and weeks on end, and we can come to the museum.
That would be very nice. No? I mean, it's a very special time for everyone, I guess.
Yes.
No? I think we have passed now half an hour easily.
Right. So
I don't know, if you don't have more questions, I would end the tour here. I hope you enjoyed this. We've shown only a part of the exhibition, of course, but the major parts we have shown. If you have questions,
come back.
You can leave it in the comments, of course. And we will hope to do this again, show you the museum, so you're not completely shut off of what's going on in this amazing museum. And so I hope to see you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.